Perfect. Thank you so much. So today's webinar is KPIs for nonprofits, and I'm going to go through a lot of hopefully interesting content for you, but I want to start off by telling you a bit about me and hopefully why I'm somewhat qualified to go over this kind of content with you. Let's begin. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my background and a bit about why I am so committed to KPIs. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and an MBA. I spent about 10 years building a tech company from idea to profitability. And in that time, I managed to do absolutely everything the hardest way possible. So that was fun, but I learned a lot. And we did manage to sell the company to a large competitor in 2018. I spent the next year of my life really soul searching, studying things that interested me and working hard to decide what I really wanted to do next. So I knew I wanted something with more meaning, something that felt purpose-driven, beyond simply tech. But tech was really what I knew. So when I came across Keela and I spoke to our founder, Najid, I realized that Keela really marries tech with purpose, and it's aimed to truly help nonprofits do more good. And after 1 year with Keela, I can truly say that it's one really purpose-driven, passionate company. And the team there is dedicated to supporting nonprofits in everything that they do. So a quick piece about Keela, and then I'll jump into the KPIs. Keela's built a CRM that's designed to help nonprofits raise more money. So in addition to our amazing CRM, which is the core of our business, we're also leading the space in something called nonprofit intelligence. And nonprofit intelligence is simply tools that we build into our software, into our CRM, and they use the data that's already in your CRM to help you make strategic decisions. So Keela has tools that can, for example, suggest custom donor lists for your campaigns based on your donor's history. We have tools that can suggest the optimal donation amounts that will appeal to each donor. And then it'll automatically add this amount to only their donation form. We have detailed KPI dashboards. They're a little different than what we're going to go over today, but we're actually considering turning our KPI dashboard view into something like I'm going to show you today. So if it's something that you really feel you want to commit to doing, Keela has it on its roadmap. We're actually going to put that into our software sometime soon. So we do much more than all of that. And if you're interested, I would definitely love to chat with you guys more. So please feel free to get in touch with me. I've included my email there and our website for Keela here. But let's move on to KPIs. And I want to tell you that one thing that we do at Keela very well is we measure everything that matters. So we can make the right decisions. Obviously, we need to grow our company and build better tools, but we also want to use all of our extra resources to teach nonprofits how they can make more impact, because that's why we're all in this game. So you're here today to learn how to build and use your own KPI dashboard. I have 2 kids under the age of 5, and my fur baby Maddie, who you can see in my picture here. And for any dog moms out there, that's almost like having 3 kids, almost. People frequently ask me how I do it all. And I'll be honest, I've really learned in these last few years how to be hyper-focused and only do what matters. Only do the things that will have the biggest and greatest impact on what I'm trying to achieve. And I've realized that that's only possible because of my KPI dashboards. I use them for every team I manage and in everything I do. Without them, I wouldn't actually be able to make the same decisions as quickly or as confidently. So the last thing I want to say before I jump into the content is that I've done a lot of webinars, attended a lot of webinars, I should say, and I try to do 2 or 3 a month, so I'm always learning something new. And if I'm honest with you, I used to always have a project lined up on the side, something I could work on while I half paid attention. And I'm going to ask that you try your best not to do this today. Learning something new is really worth 40, 45 minutes of your time. Being distracted and missing the point and then getting frustrated that you wasted your time, that's not even worth a minute. So if you're here, awesome. Be here in full force, and I promise you I will do my very best to keep it engaging and have you leave today with a really valuable new skill. So we're going to start with something fun, okay? I want you to imagine you're driving a car. Let's make it exciting. You're driving a shiny red convertible. You're cruising down the highway. There's lots of other cars around you. You're a good driver though, so you're feeling comfortable. Someone's changing lanes in front of you, your exit's approaching. You can see far up ahead that traffic has actually slowed down a bit. Now I want you to freeze this moment. What information have you subconsciously taken in up to this point? What information has actually made you feel calm and in control behind the wheel? First, and I guess most obviously, is you can see through your windshield. You know that you're around 2 car lengths from the car in front of you. You know from your speedometer that you're going just slightly above the speed limit, which is a reasonable speed for this stretch of road. You know your car is functioning, or your check engine light will be on. And finally, you can glance in any of your mirrors so you know who's behind you. Now I want you to imagine that I remove your speedometer and I take away your check engine light. And now I cover your entire windshield. All you have left is your rear view mirror. What do you think would happen? Well, there's really only 2 possibilities. The first, you would crash. Or I guess you could say you'd keep going for a little while and not crash. You wouldn't know where you were going, but there is a chance that people would get out of your way and you'd cruise along a little longer. Now, building an organization without KPIs is actually the exact same thing. You're moving forwards, maybe, but success is only really measured by not crashing. And the rear view mirrors, these are like your year-end reports. They simply show you that you didn't crash. They show you after the fact what you didn't crash into or the exit that you didn't manage to take. So the point I'm trying to make here with this story is that everyone can get used to driving this way. They go really slowly and they crash all the time. But if no one knows any better way, they assume this is just how you drive. So I spent 10 years building an organization, looking at nothing but the rearview mirror, my year-end report. I would draw conclusions about what I thought I should do next year, and then I'd make a plan and jump back behind the wheel, and off I went. No windshield, no speedometer, and no KPIs. There are still far too many organizations that drive like this, using nothing but their gut feelings to guide them day to day, and their year-end report to look back at the results for the year that's now over. So they never know how they really did until that year-end report is finalized, until it's too late. Now, I do recognize that some things are measured along the way, like perhaps donations received to date, or the number of donations in your database, or number of donors in the database, rather, like your contact lists. But maybe, so some people actually take it a step further, right? And they'll look at things like average gift size, quarterly, for example, instead of annually. And these are really good steps. But I want you to consider this. If you're tracking 2 to 3 KPIs quarterly, you really are better than many. You're probably driving like this. So you can actually see right in front of you, and you're probably not going to crash. You can avoid it, but you can't see far enough ahead, far enough in the distance to make strategic decisions. Furthermore, if you think about it, you're probably feeling a decent amount of anxiety. Running an organization without being able to see clearly, it's pretty daunting. Here's some questions. Let's say a few key donors leave. Do you know exactly why? You run a campaign and it falls flat, unless it raises less than half of what you were intending. Do you know exactly what to do different next time? Your year-end report shows you that your recurring donations have dropped. Do you know how to fix it? I want you to think really hard about this. Do you really know, or is it just a gut check? You're guesstimating based on what you think might work. So what I want to show you today is how to drive like this. When you have a full dashboard of KPIs, this is what growing an organization should feel like. You'll still need to drive things forward. You'll still need to steer and make decisions, but you'll be able to see really clearly. You'll be able to make decisions based on an understanding of where you're going and what's likely up ahead. So I want to talk about the basics. If my driving metaphor left you with any conclusion, and I hope it left you with the conclusion that KPIs are really important. So what on earth are they, and how do you use them to make your organization stronger and your life easier? So KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. It could also simply be called a measure or a metric or even a number that stands for something. It's really a measure of some part of your organization that tells you something over time. Now, the part of KPI that I really want to focus on is this word key. So if you measure everything, you're only mildly better off than if you measure nothing at all. Too much data actually creates noise, and you won't know what to focus on and why. So when you design your KPI dashboard, it's really critical that you choose your KPIs based on what you want to measure, and that you understand why this metric's important to you and to your team. So that's what I'm going to help you with today, show you how to choose the right KPI and then how to read and analyze them. There's 3 types of KPIs, 3 buckets I call them. And it's important to understand that you have a nice balance of each of these. So the first one is KPIs that the board wants to track or wants you to track. So perhaps this is the average gift size, donor lifetime value, or something totally obscure and unusual, but relevant to your organization. Regardless, these are metrics that the board is asking you to report on each quarter, each year. So it's really important that you understand how to measure them, but also how your actions affect them, how what you do every week and every month actually changes these metrics. The next bucket is KPIs that are used as benchmarks for your industry. Now, these are the big KPIs. So these usually define the most important elements of running a successful nonprofit. Some examples are donor retention rate, donor growth rate, and maybe open rate if you're using email as your main source of communication. The final bucket is management KPIs, and these are the ones we're going to focus on mostly for this course because these are the ones that are often neglected. These are simply KPIs that you determine are important for you and your team to understand the impact that your initiatives are having day to day, week to week. These are usually leading indicators, while the board and benchmark KPIs are lagging indicators. If I lost you there, don't worry. We're going to go into detail on leading and lagging indicators, but it's an important difference. Management KPIs are usually leading indicators. We'll come back to that. One important and less intuitive thing that I'd like to mention here is that consistency matters more than accuracy. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because if your metrics are not accurate, you're not going to trust them, you're not going to use them. But if you know that they're close to accurate, or even as accurate as they can be, then it's more important that you are consistent in the way you measure them. You'll be looking at trends over time. And the most dangerous thing that you can do is shift the way you measure month by month in an attempt to be more and more accurate, because what you'll do instead is you'll collect rather meaningless data. So remember, be as accurate as you can, but then be insanely consistent in how you measure. So I want to go through some nonprofit KPI examples. Now, there's quite literally an infinite number of KPIs you could choose to measure. So where do you even begin? How do you choose what's right for you? I recommend selecting a few common KPIs, like the ones you see here in this. I've chosen 9 that are kind of the most common, or at least some of the common ones. And from there, you simply begin measuring. And then as soon as you start to understand your metrics, you're going to see the need for new measures, things that you realize you need to know, but you can't quite measure from the numbers you're looking at. You'll also quickly see which metrics you don't need to be measuring and which ones aren't showing you what you thought that they would show you. So if you've ever been told just to jump in and start, this is really one of those initiatives. KPIs will make more and more sense the more you measure them, watch them, and talk about them. So starting can be the hardest part, but once you jump in, they'll start to really come to light for you. So I'm going to go through a few of these. I'm going to pick 5 out of this list, and I'll tell you why I've chosen these 5 after. So just follow with me. Okay, we've got total funds raised. This is Everyone should be measuring this. It's very simple. It's a count of the dollars you've raised if you're a fundraising organization. Next, we have donation growth rate. Now, this is the rate at which your donations grow. This could be month over month or more likely year over year. Now, consider this. For this webinar, we're trying to focus on shorter term metrics. We're trying to avoid looking at the year behind you. So donation growth rate might not be a steady month over month rate. It might not tell you much because of major gift donors combined with smaller donors combined with recurring gifts. So what could you measure that shows you something valuable month over month? How about watching your recurring donation growth rate? So rather than total donation growth rate, which is important after the fact, recurring gifts build month over month as people join your recurring gift programs. Because of this, there's far less volatility than total donations received. So keep donation growth rate in your year-end report, but try adding recurring donation growth rate in your weekly or monthly dashboard. The reason I'm going into this much detail on this kind of thing is I really want you to understand how to make decisions about your KPIs, how to choose the correct ones for your organization, and also how to manipulate them a little bit so that it measures what you actually need to see to make better decisions. I want you to feel like you're in control of this rather than, at the whim of your board or the benchmarks of your industry. Next, we have fundraising ROI. And I know that ROI, which means return on investment, can be a bit daunting for some people, so I'm going to go into a little detail on exactly how to calculate it. So this metric, fundraising ROI, really would be best applied to a specific campaign, as it looks at how much money you made after all costs were accounted for. It then converts this into a percentage by dividing by the costs. Here's an example. If you spend $5,000 on a campaign that raised, say, $40,000 in funds, your ROI calculation would be $40,000 minus the $5,000 you spent divided by that same $5,000 in costs. In this case, that's 700%. So fundraising ROI per campaign can really help you make these short-term decisions. Now, consider this as a year-end metric. You can actually combine all your campaigns together for a single fundraising ROI number. But what does this show you? This will show you how much you raised from all your campaigns, or in ROI terms, how much more you raised than spent. And this is a great way to show your donors or your board how effectively you've spent their money after the fact. However, don't get stuck trying to measure this total fundraising ROI month over month, because it won't tell you which campaigns have been most successful or which ones are even losing you money. You want your metrics to tell you what you need to do next, what to do more of, what to do less of, and what things to stop doing altogether. So when you do measure fundraising ROI by campaign, that's a great metric for short-term decision-making. Get clear on the purpose of each KPI, and then be sure to use it for that purpose. Next up is average gift size. This is one of my favorite metrics. Average gift size can tell you a lot. So on the surface, this metric is simply the middle of a range in gifts that you receive over a period of time. It's an average. But when you look at this metric with other metrics combined, you can look at correlations, and this can show you exactly where you're winning or you're losing in your efforts. So I'll tell you a quick story to illustrate this. One nonprofit I worked with was tracking average gift size annually. They'd never used it to make decisions. They simply gathered the data and they reported on it in their year-end report. They noticed one year that their average gift size had dropped significantly. They were actually surprised because it had been one of their strongest years to date for total funds raised. They discussed this with their team and with their board, and they were trying to figure out why it happened. And it was only then that they considered that their new fundraising director, Maggie, who they had hired in April, was 28 years old, while the one before had been in her 40s. They looked at the campaigns and the events that they'd run that year, and they realized that while they were all hugely successful, they were attracting a very different demographic of donor. Their donor list size had skyrocketed. Their engagement on social media had too. They had hundreds more donors, each contributing less than their historical donor group. So this is really valuable insight. But imagine how much more they could have done and how much more effective they could have been if they had known this during the year. If they knew that their average gift size was going down, but their number of donors was jumping, they could have been strategic. They could have used methods to boost average gift size or methods to encourage online recurring donation signups, something that younger donors are far more willing to do. So the point I'm making here with this story is that looking at a metric at the end of the year is valuable, but you never have the chance to use your data. Use your data to make changes before that year is behind you. The last KPI I'll cover in this quick overview is recurring gift percentage. Now, anyone who understands subscription businesses recognizes the value of recurring donations. They may be comparatively small, but they add up, and they're really a great way to allow donors to feel committed, to show they want to support longer term, and a monthly gift works with the donor's budget. So what's more, this actually provides your organization with reliable stream of funds. I'm a big fan of recurring gift programs, but let's talk about the KPI. So you're likely tracking total dollars received through your recurring gift programs. And we know you're definitely tracking total dollars received overall. So how can looking at recurring gifts as a percentage of this total help you make better decisions? Thinking back to my story about the organization that failed to use their average gift size until it was too late, this metric will allow you insight into what's really happening with your donors. If you're attracting large numbers of a new demographic of donor, and you see that your recurring gift percentage is increasing month over month with no changes in your communications, it's pretty safe to assume that this new demographic is more open to the idea of recurring gift programs. So this is when you want to lean in. You want to develop a campaign that targets them with this message around your recurring gift program and aims to sign up as many new donors as you can. Use your data to be strategic and use it to make better decisions now. So here's that list again of those 9 KPIs, and there's a reason I chose to look closely at those 5 specific KPIs. It's not because they're better than any others, and it's not because they're the most important. It's because each is a different type of KPI. So let's start at the beginning. We had total funds raised. This is simply a count of dollars raised. Next, we have donation growth rate. This is a rate. The rate your donations change over time in this example, but a rate simply compares one measure per unit to something else. Next up is fundraising ROI, or return on investment, which will always look at the ratio between net profit and cost. You can technically calculate a return on investment on anything you spend money or time on, assuming you can convert your time to dollars. Average gift size is an average or a typical figure in a set of data. And finally, we have recurring gift percentage. And this is simply a percentage of something else, a proportion of the whole. So you can use counts, rates, ROIs, averages, percentages, ratios, anything to measure whatever matters to you and your team. And as you review your dashboard each week, each month, you'll start to see holes in your data. You'll start to see measures you're missing. Once you become familiar with your dashboard, you might realize something like, well, here's an example. So total funds raised, it's really important you need to know it, but total funds raised per staff member might be really helpful. So you can defend your new hires to the board and you know when to make your next hire. So you simply add this metric. Your metric should always help you make these better decisions, and it'll start to become more and more clear once you start looking at them and discussing them. Here's another list, and I've included this just to show how many examples there are. We're not going to go through each one. This is a list of possible KPIs for marketing and donor outreach. We have email open rate, organic traffic count, cost per lead. There are quite literally hundreds more. In this list, I've collected common KPIs for measuring events. I know we're not having many right now, but this is a big part of running a nonprofit. So we have event check-ins, event ROI, or registration to check-in ratio. The point is, you must pick and choose because you can't possibly measure it all, And if you simply look up a list online of which KPIs you should use, it's not going to be measuring your organization and it's not going to be helping your team. You need to select what matters to you, to your team, and to your organization. You can always add more later. So next, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to build your own dashboard. When you build your KPI dashboard, it's going to look something like this. Now, before you ask, where are all the numbers? Don't worry, they're coming. But there's a lot you're going to need to clarify before you begin to measure. So I want to walk you through this step by step and show you what to include in each column. So you can actually download a copy of this exact dashboard. We're going to go through a dashboard at the end and do an analysis, and I'll give you that exact dashboard as well. So you guys can get your hands on it and make edits if you feel like that's an easier way to get started. But don't forget to make it your own and add the KPIs that you need. So we're going to go through this column by column, starting left to right, and I'm just going to talk through what to include in each column. So in the beginning, we have KPI name. Okay, this is obvious. This is just what you call your metric, right? So we're going to go through an example of each one. So email open rate is what we're going to use for this example. Next, we have the definition, or what this KPI measures. So here you define precisely what this metric is intending to measure. This is important. For email open rate, we have simply the percentage of email recipients that open a given email. Now, the really important one is how it's calculated. Remember, we talked about consistency over accuracy, and this is where you make sure you're consistent, because you need to write down exactly how you got the metric, the source that you pulled the metric from, because hopefully it's somewhat automated and you're getting it from software, and then if any calculations were made to make it yours. So in this case, email open rate, we've got the formula, how it's calculated, but right below we show that we pull our email open rate from Keela, and Keela actually will calculate it for you, so you never have to worry about manual tabulation or counting anything each month, because that will take way too long and you won't stick with it. So anytime you have software that can pull a metric for you reliably, please consider using that. It's going to be much easier as you go through this. Next, we have why it matters. So this is the section where you're going to make some notes on your assumptions. You're going to talk about why this metric was chosen, why it matters to you and to your organization. You might mention how to read this metric. What does an increase imply? What does a decrease imply? Be concise, but be really specific. So let's look at what we did for email open rate. So here, email open rate tells us if our audience is engaged, reading our emails, and thus likely to donate. This is an important leading indicator. I promise we'll cover that soon. Track this for each campaign, each weekly newsletter. Great. Now we've got monthly trends. You might track some metrics weekly and monthly, while others are quarterly. But make sure you note the time frame and you discuss the changes that you're expecting to see, or any volatility or seasonality that you expect. Here we've got email open rate, and this should be tracked for every email campaign. So if open rate increases, maybe we need to note the subject lines that worked, why it worked so well. And when it decreases, we try some new subject lines. Benchmark is up next, and many metrics are going to have industry benchmarks, and these are published by reputable think tanks or associations. So these are really valuable because they show you how you're doing when you compare yourself to your peers. So remember, it's important, benchmarks are not the best, nor are they the worst. If you're really struggling to hit a benchmark, you need to consider how you're doing things, because there's likely a lot of room for improvement. For email open rate, it's at a whopping 26% for your industry, which is great and maybe feels a little daunting because that's a great open rate, but it just shows us how engaged our donors tend to be when we send them emails. And finally, we have goals. So this is your internal goal. What is your team striving to hit? What's your target? I recommend waiting until you have at least 3 months of data, or if you have historical data, great, before you set your goals, because you won't really know what to set until you've got an idea of your historical data and what's realistic. So you can see here, I've set a goal of 30% as our email open rate. It's pretty ambitious, but I think we can do it. Now, this might look like a lot of work, and it is. It'll take some time. You're not going to read this every time you use your dashboard, but the value is really important. There's huge value in going through this process, and there's for two main reasons. So the first is the process of thinking this stuff through, the process of writing this all out is what's actually going to make your dashboard valuable to you and to your team. But it's what will allow you to really understand the metric so that you can use it and analyze it. And number two, if you take the time to do this, your entire team will be able to do this with you. They'll be able to understand your metrics. You won't need to explain it all every time. There's no way everyone on your team is going to know every metric, is going to understand exactly what they mean and why. And if you've got this in here, it's a quick check, it's a quick reference if they're confused or if something's missing. It's really important to keep your team aligned and keep your metrics working for you. Eventually, your dashboard will look like this. So we're jumping ahead. There's one last very important point that I want to cover, and I know I promised you I would, and that's leading and lagging indicators. So I want to explain this framework because it's single-handedly changed the way my team used KPIs. The framework considers every KPI and whether it's a leading or a lagging indicator. This follows the idea that metrics tell you either where you're going, while other metrics will tell you where you've been. And we've talked a bit about this. Some are always going to be helping you look forwards, while others, by definition, are always going to be looking back. So let me explain this a little more clearly. Let's start with lagging indicators, since these are the ones that people are most familiar with. Lagging indicators help you look backwards. They're the final measures of the results that you're working to achieve. It's a measure of something after the fact, and these often show you whether you've hit your target or not. Lagging indicators should measure your major organizational goals, and that's key. What are you striving for? What's your goal? This is what your lagging indicators are going to measure for you. You're always going to have fewer lagging indicators than leading indicators. So here's an example. Total funds raised would be a common and important lagging indicator for any fundraising organization. There's many measures of impact as well that can be developed depending on your programs or your impact area. And measures of impact would definitely be a lagging indicator because impact and fundraising are really your main goals. So they look back and they show you what you've achieved. Now this could simply mean looking back 1 month or 1 quarter, but lagging indicators measure the results, not the progress towards the results. So keep in mind, it's what your definition of results is that determines whether a metric is leading or lagging. So what's a leading indicator then? A leading indicator is a measure of activity, week to week, month to month, that actually predicts that what your results are going to be at year end. So a leading indicator is the number that, when you watch it really carefully, can allow you time to make changes before it's too late, before your year end happens. So here's an example. Most metrics that measure donor engagement are actually leading indicators. And this is because the more engaged your donors are, the more likely they will be to donate. If raising funds is one of your lagging indicators, I want you to think of all the things your team does week over week, month over month to ensure that those funds are raised. Measuring any one of these things could be really helpful, and these metrics will be in your section called leading indicators. Now, leading indicators are important to classify because you want to be clear about what they achieve. It may not be clear in the beginning, but you'll soon start to see that whenever donor engagement in one area improves, a lagging indicator like donor retention rate will also improve. Your leading and your lagging indicators are connected, and it's important to understand why, and it'll start to come to light as you get familiar with them. So let's have a pop quiz. I want to walk through and ask whether you have a leading or a lagging indicator. So feel free to write it in the notes, shout it out. This is for you to test your knowledge. Total funds raised, is that a leading or a lagging indicator? It is a lagging indicator. This is one of your main goals. Next, we have website traffic. This is most definitely a leading indicator. This measures awareness. It's an important part of the donor journey, but it's not your end goal to drive traffic to your website. It's something that predicts donor engagement. How about email open rate? Leading or lagging? What do you think? Leading. This again measures engagement. It's a predictor of donations, but it's not your end goal. And finally, we have donor lifetime value. Go ahead and call this one a lagging indicator because this is really a combination of lifespan, average donation amount, and frequency. It's a way to measure funds raised and most importantly, the value of your donors. So one last point, leading and lagging indicators can be different for different people. So before I totally confuse you, follow this example. A communications director's goal is to drive awareness. It's measured by subscribers and contacts. So a leading indicator for your communications director might be social media engagement or website traffic, while her lagging indicator might be new contacts added. Your fundraising director, however, has different goals. It's to use these contacts and turn them into donors and into donations. So the leading indicator for your fundraising director might be email open rates, while her lagging indicator would be funds raised. So remember, the dashboard that we're building for today, it's for your entire organization, not for individuals or teams. So consider your goal for the organization. But if you do choose to build dashboards for teams or even individuals down the road, this is an important distinction to understand. Your lagging indicator is always measuring your end goal after the fact. Let's talk about baseline, and then we'll jump in and do an analysis of an actual dashboard. Your baseline is important. Your baseline is simply the first 3, 6, even 12 months of data. So you know where you are today. So you can start to test and try different things. You can start to proactively take initiatives to see how it affects your measures. Now, if you can, getting this historical data will help you get a real head start. It'll help you understand where your organization is. It'll kind of shine a light on where things have been. If you can't, if you have no historical data, not even 3 months worth, that's okay. But recognize that it's going to take you at least 3 months before you start to see the trends. So commit to doing this for 3 months before you make any decisions on abandoning the initiative, because that first 3 months will be when this all starts to show its magic. And finally, 4 tips before we build our own dashboard. What's the right time frame to measure this over? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? Or is this really a metric that only shows us what we need to see annually? Make sure you think about it before you select the metric. Which direction is positive? So this is interesting because, for example, donor churn, a lower number is better. Obviously, funds raised, a higher number is better. Make sure you understand which direction is positive and that you acknowledge it. So when you're reading your dashboard, you're not getting confused. Number 3, can measuring KPIs be automated? This is really important. If you're manually counting, you're manually gathering all your data, you're never going to use it. It's going to be such an onerous task. Keela has lots of KPIs built in. In fact, we have an entire dashboard in Keela, so you can pull your KPIs with the click of a button. A lot of different CRMs do this as well, or at least will have some KPIs for you. If you're still using a spreadsheet and you're at the stage where you really want to be using KPIs effectively, I'd recommend looking at a CRM or a software that can pull KPIs for you. If you're doing it on your own, believe me, if it takes you more than 5 or 10 minutes to pull the numbers, you're going to abandon it because it takes too long. So consider automating your KPI collection. Now, we talked a bit about this already, the idea of being committed for 3 months. Make sure you can start to see trends. And at that point, you can consider if your KPI is right for you or not. Before you drop any KPIs, give it 3 months. You really need to see those trends. Alas, we are here. So I want to run through an actual dashboard analysis. This is something you're going to do with your team and potentially even your board. So I want you to see how someone, myself in this case, might run a dashboard review meeting with a team. So I'm going to pretend I'm doing this with a team and we're going to go through the numbers. So I'm going to shift gears and show you a dashboard that I've created for this purpose. Now, I've got at the top, as you can see, and I'm looking at my other screen, so excuse me if I'm turning my head, but I want to make sure I can read this properly on my big screen. So we've got leading indicators at the top, you can see here in row 6. So we're going to start by looking at these. Leading indicators are always first because these are the activities, as we said, that you're going to do and consider before you get to your year end, before you get to the end of your month even. So let's start with website traffic. This is simply the unique visitors that come to your website every month in this case. We're looking at monthly dashboard. So we pull this from Google Analytics. It's something that you should be able to pull quite easily. And I want to slide over and look at the numbers we've got. We're looking at the year to date. In this case, we're looking at January through September metrics. You can see that it started quite slow at 4,000 and started to increase month over month with a nice healthy jump. Starts to pick up speed in April, May, June at 6,000 with a big jump in August. So I'd probably say to my team, what on earth happened in August? How did we go from 6,800 to 7,890 people in 1 month? That's huge. That's a new record for us. So someone might say, actually, we had an event in August, our big event. And oh, perfect. Well, obviously, that event was not only successful because we know about it, but it drove people to our website. And that is a measure of engagement. It's really showing that while our event was successful, it also had the right effect on awareness about our nonprofit. Something interesting here is the metric for September. So it wasn't quite as high as August, which is to be expected because there was no event in September. However, it's much higher than May, June, and July. So what this tells me is that our event in August not only created a lot of excitement, but people are now coming back to our website after the event. They're aware of us and they're engaged and they're coming to our site. This shows me that whoever's doing our marketing and our digital marketing is doing a great job at driving people to our website. I would want to check. So I always look at what's an action step I can take after I understand the metric. I'd want to make sure that our website was up to speed, everything was really working well, our imagery was right, everything was up to date, and that our content was really engaging. It looks like people are coming to the site. Let's make sure it's optimized. So next up, we have email open rate. We've talked a lot about email open rate in this webinar today. And again, email open rate is just the percentage of email recipients who are opening each email. It's quite simple. Let's look over here at the benchmark. 26%, give or take. And we've set a personal goal of 30%. Wow, that's ambitious. Let's see how we did. We can see in January, February, and March in Q1, we are not even hitting our benchmark. We're really not doing well. And then something happens in April because we see a big jump in open rate and it starts to climb consistently with a high of 28% in September. That's fantastic news and shows that we're on the right track. So what happened in April? Why do we think that changed so much? So we discussed it with the team and we realized that that's when Maggie started. Remember we hired Maggie? Well, she took over doing our email correspondence and our email marketing with donors. And she obviously really understands how to do subject lines effectively so that donors are engaged and interested and they want to open our emails because they're opening them. That's great. I'd give a huge pat on the back to Maggie for this. Next up, we have email click rate. And I see really similar trends. We see that our benchmark here is 13%. And our goal is 13%. So we've kept it steady at the benchmark, which is okay. You can see here it starts slow and then it starts to pick up with a high at 15%. So we're over benchmark and over our goal. Maggie's obviously got the hand of email marketing. So this is fantastic news. And just to clarify email click rate, if anyone doesn't know, That's simply when people open your email, how many of them are actually clicking on things and engaging with the email and doing what you ask them to do in the email, which might be clicking on something to read. So it's showing people are opening it and people are interested in the content. Next up, we have donor conversion rate. So this is the percentage of email recipients who clicked on a donation link and made a donation from the emails that we've sent. You can see the benchmark at 17%, and our internal goal is 20%. So how did we do here? Uh-oh, we are way below benchmark and even further below our internal goal. So this shows me that, you know, Maggie's great at crafting the email. She's great at engaging donors, but she probably needs to brush up on donor conversion, on solicitation, on making the ask in an effective way. The next step I'd take here is I'd just ask her to brush up on it. Take a course, read some articles, figure out how to get a little better at making that conversion on the call to action for donations, because this is something that she is not able to hit even the benchmark at. So that's a great next step and something that Maggie will probably really appreciate because now she knows exactly how to improve. Moving on, we've got average gift size, my favorite. The average size of a gift or a donation from your donors. So our goal internally is 175, and that seems pretty ambitious. Taking a look at our numbers, we started the year off at a healthy 150. It started to rise in February, and then we saw it drop. 142, 138, 132. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Our average gift size is dropping. Keep looking, July, August, starts to get a bit better. Something happened in August and September, it turned around. Now there's not enough data here to be certain why. All we can see here is that our average gift size took a bit of a tumble in the middle of the year and seems to be recovering. I don't know yet why. The team doesn't seem to know why. Let's look if there's another KPI that we can correlate with this to try to draw a more clear picture. So moving down, we can look at donor list size. Now this is the number of contacts, both donors and potential donors that are in our database. So our goal is 10,000. That's exciting. 10,000 would be fantastic. And you can see here that from January to September, we are making a nice steady pace towards that 10,000. Now, if I were to ask you, just looking at this row of numbers, which months are the best? Which months did we have, you know, the biggest addition to our donor list? Which one's the smallest? It's really kind of hard to tell. I'm looking through here and I mean, I could probably guess, but I'd have to do some quick brain math and I don't want to be doing that when I'm reading my dashboard. So how might we look at this number so it gives us the data we need to see? Look down to the next list, or the next row rather. We have donor list growth rate. Donor list growth rate is the rate at which your email list is growing. Now, we see here percentages, 6%, 5%, oh, 7% in March, that was a good one. 5, 4, 4, 3, 5, 4, you know, this is really good, it's better, but it's still hard for me to understand, you know, how much better was August than September? Was it better? We see 5 and 4, but is that significant? Let's try one more way of looking at the same data. Slide down to row 14, and you can see contacts added monthly. Here we're looking at the same data, but we're looking at it as a whole person. 200 people in January, 250 in February. We can quickly see which months were the biggest and by how much. 360 people were added to our contact list in March. What did we do in March? Let's do it again. Let's do it often. How many people were added to our contact list in August? How did we achieve that? This is the metric I'd want to see. So while you definitely want to know your donor list size, let's keep that one. I would probably delete row 13, donor list growth rate, because it doesn't show me anything really unique or valuable. And we want to keep this as minimal as possible so we don't get overwhelmed with data. So that's how you're going to manipulate your dashboard as you go and as you see the things that you start to see. You can change things and you can choose different types of metrics. Next and last in our leading indicators, we have recurring donation growth rate. So I see our goal here is 7% month over month. That's pretty ambitious. So how did we do? We have 4%, 5%, 3%. Ouch, that first quarter was not doing well. And then it jumps up to 6, 8, 8, 9. Wow, something's changed. This is really starting to grow. Our recurring donation growth rate is doing fantastic with a high of 10%. Let's think back to our average gift size. We've drawn this comparison a few times in different stages of this webinar, so maybe that's it. Slide back to average gift size and check, is there a correlation? Well, you know what, there is. Our average gift size was dropping while our recurring donation growth rate was jumping. This is interesting. Now, one thing that seems to be a little off here is we see a recovery in average gift size from 135 to 140 August and September, and that seems to be when our growth in recurring donations is the highest at 8 and 10%. So if these are correlated, what's going on here? Well, someone on the team lets me know that we actually turned on something called Smart Ask in Keela, and that's a tool that actually selects the maximum donation amount that the donor is likely to give based on their giving history. So we know that John gives $100 consistently. He's been giving $100 for a couple of years now. And when we ask him to join our recurring donation program, we don't ask him for $20 because Smart Ask automatically puts $100 as his suggested donation amount into just his donation form. Perfect. John says that sounds great. They obviously know me well. He clicks yes. And now he's a recurring donor, but at a higher amount than if we had just asked everyone for $20. It looks like Smart Ask is working because we can see in August, our average gift size goes up and our recurring donation growth rate stays steady. This is how you can guess and test things that you want to try. You can get creative. You can try to fix things that you think could be doing better. And then you can watch the numbers and see, did it work? What was the effect it had? This is where the power of your KPI dashboard really comes into play. So now let's look at lagging indicators. And as I told you, you're going to have less lagging indicators than leading indicators. So here we've got only 4. The first one I want to show you is donor lifetime value. Donor lifetime value on its own, you know, it's a great lagging indicator to look at after the fact, but when one major gift donor gives you a massive donation and then some smaller gift donors, you know, give you $20, it really doesn't show you much to look at it cumulatively or altogether. So we've broken it into a segment. This is donor lifetime value for only those that give under $100. You can see here, your donor lifetime value was, you know, $12.45 in January. Uh-oh, starts going down. We can see it going down. I'm going to go and guess that this is also correlated with average gift size and with our donation, recurring donation growth rate. They all tie together, and you can see here that each one is showing the same exact pattern and the same exact recovery in August when we turn on Keela's Smart Ask. One thing that's important is when you see that numbers are strong, it's as important to know what you're doing right and to keep doing them than it is to try to do new things. Look at donor retention rate. Our goal is 30%, the benchmark is 25%, and we are off the charts at a high of 48%. Don't change a thing. That's just as important. Remember, we want to get specific on what we spend our time and energy on. Our donor retention program is doing really well. Keep doing it. Make sure we know what's working and why. And finally, we have total funds raised monthly and total funds raised cumulatively. And this is always going to be the big lagging indicator at the end. And what this can tell us is how much we're on track to raise by the end of the year. You look through month over month. Here's a perfect example. We know we have our year-end gala. We know that our year-end gala usually raises between 25 and 30% of our annual funds. But what are we on track for this year, and what should we set as our goal? We look at these numbers and we break them all down, and we can see that our average monthly revenue July, August, and September is around $70,000. So if we expect the same for October, November, December, we're actually getting pretty close to the 1 million mark in funds raised. And that's an exciting milestone to rally donor engagement around. So let's figure out exactly what we need to hit for our end of year gala to make it $1 million in funds raised for the year. In fact, let's make it a big goal that we announce at the gala and everyone rallies to help us reach. You can only do that if you have the data and if you know what you're likely to hit before you hit it. I've added the calculation down here for the gala target so you can see exactly how I predicted it and how I calculated it. But that is the end of the dashboard, and that's the end pretty much of all the metrics I want to cover. So I know I've covered all of the metrics here, and I hope you guys have a much better understanding of KPIs and why they're important and the power that it'll give you over everything you're trying to do in your amazing organization. So I hope we have a few minutes for questions, but that's a wrap.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tasi. So for those of you who have to jump on the hour, please know we are going to just run through a few questions, but we will record that. So if you need to go, off you go, and watch for the recording that you'll get by email later today. Okay, Tasi, let's just jump right into a few questions. Can you talk a little bit about how, or actually whether, these KPIs that you've kind of presented today can actually be sort of transferred to things that don't necessarily relate to fundraising, but maybe relate to program initiatives?
Sure. Yeah. So, it's interesting. There's certain things that are easily quantified, like funds raised dollars, right? But there's lots of things we do that we want to be able to measure that are not quantifiable. And there's ways to measure them. So this might sound like a cop-out, but the first thing I always do is I Google how or top KPIs for, and then I put in what I want to do. So KPIs for impact, for example, was one. And there's a lot of people that have researched which KPIs are best, and it gives you a starting point. So if it's not fundraising, but it's impact, or it's programs, certain programs, you can even say KPIs for program management or for running a program, and it will give you a ton that you can look through and say, oh, that makes sense, or I'll try that one, and that'll get you started. Once you start tracking them, you'll be able to see which ones work and which ones are really not telling you what you thought they might. But every time you do this, think back to your goal. Think back to what are we trying to achieve? What is the final outcome that we're really striving for in this program, in this initiative? And make sure that you find a way to measure that, because that is going to be your important lagging indicator. And leading indicators really end up being activity. Like maybe it's just how many emails you sent, because that really helps, make your program more effective or reach more people. Or maybe it's how many individuals you engaged with that month in your program, so you know how many lives you're impacting. So think about the activities you do and think about your end goal, and then you can really measure anything. It doesn't matter if it's in dollars and cents or if it's in activities or investment of your time.
That's great. And we've had a question come in. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the key indicators at the board level and what those look like?
Sure. So again, it really depends on your board. I would, again, because there's quite literally thousands. So we're actually at Keela, we have something called Keela University. And if anyone's interested, it's a completely free CFRE certification course on fundraising. And there's a whole chapter at the end on KPIs that we are going to release, I think, in 3 weeks. But it's going to cover in great detail. I think we have like 60 KPIs that we go through in that, so you can look through them. But the board is really usually going to want the most benchmarked KPIs. So the ones that when you type in the most important KPIs for the nonprofit industry, you're going to find a list of anywhere from 50 to 1,000, and your board is probably going to want those top 10. So benchmark and board KPIs are often the same, and I would ask them. I would say, here's the KPIs that I recommend, because these are the ones that are, best measure our impact area and the nonprofit industry. Are there any missing that you'd like to see? If you want to show them some of the analysis, they might then start to realize ones that are missing or ones that matter to them, but it really depends. I mean, I've created my dashboards based on what I want to see because I know what my team is trying to achieve. We can still look at benchmark KPIs because, you know, we have investors as well in our company, and that's important for them to see, but everyone asks for something different. So we often have to go and gather it. But if you have a great foundation and you use those benchmark KPIs, your board will be pretty impressed.
Great. And for managers and EDs, how do you suggest opening the conversation with your team about building the dashboard?
Yeah, so I can tell you what I did. We didn't have dashboards when I started at Keela, but we did measure things very well. And so I just went ahead and I created the dashboard. And I spent a lot of time on that first section, this part, the purple part. So I spent a lot of time really digging into this thoroughly. So I had a lot of information in here. And I sent it to my team beforehand and I said, take a look at this, read through it all and come with questions because we're going to go through and we're going to track this stuff. And I want to know, you know, if there's something you feel is missing or something you feel that, you know, is maybe not measuring what we should be. It just gave everyone a chance to, on their own, privately review it. And then we got together as a team and we started to talk about it. And it was quite amazing, the discussion that came out of it. But the real magic in this, and I've watched teams that are resistant to this start to use it. And the magic comes when you start to track trends. So if you have historical data, maybe you have historical data on one metric, but not another, put them both on your dashboard and include the historical data that you have, because that's what shows people how their behaviors affected the numbers. And once they start seeing that, once they start, like my story about Maggie, once you say, hey, Maggie, this was you. We hired you in April, and look, this changed literally the month after you joined us. Like Maggie will always be a metric fan because it really pinpointed what she's brought to the team and her value. And when people can see that tangibly, it's almost addicting. Like you want to see, what is the impact I'm having? How are my efforts showing up in this organization? And that's what this dashboard can do for you. So if your team's hesitant to do it, I would build it first for them, and then walk through the numbers with them and start talking about how their efforts have made an impact and how the things they've done have affected the numbers. And I think they'll be really engaged.
Well, I think that's a great place, a great positive note to leave off today. Tasi, did you have any final comments before we sign off?
I don't know. Just to reach out, I've got my email on the first slide, and if anyone has any questions about Keela, I'd love to help. And obviously, if you can sign up for Keela University, that KPI chapter is going to go into a lot more detail on all of this stuff. So if this is kind of whet your appetite, but you want more, there's lots more coming.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tasi. It's been a great presentation today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I do want to remind everyone that we will follow up with you by email this afternoon with the webinar recording and the slide deck. There will be a short survey there that takes less than 5 minutes to fill out. If you'd like to share some feedback with Tasi about the presentation today, or let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered in a future webinar. As a reminder, as I mentioned off the top, our 2021 Canadian Nonprofit Sector Salary and Benefits Report will be published in January. We do really need your help right now with the survey. So I've put that link in the chat box. We'd appreciate it if you could take 15 minutes to fill that out. You will get 50% off purchasing the final report as our thank you gift. We'll include the link to the survey in the email you'll get later today as well. So on behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. Our next free webinar will be on December 3rd, and will feature Bruce McDonald from Imagine Canada facilitating a panel discussion about what we've seen in the nonprofit sector this year and the expected trends for 2021. So you won't want to miss that. There will be a link in the email we sent today in case you'd like to register for that session. Thank you again for taking part in today's webinar. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.